Atera ist das IT-Wundermittel. Fernüberwachung und Verwaltung, Fernzugriff, Helpdesk und Ticketing, klug.
She said, I'm always too on, you'll never see me sober.
Verwaltung, Fernzugriff, Helpdesk und Ticketing, klug.
Oh, bin ich schon live in dem Fall. Okay, passt. Herzlich willkommen. Anscheinend bin ich schon live, habe ich gerade gemerkt. So, dann tue ich mir schnell alles einrichten, weil ich habe jetzt das noch gar nicht eigentlich gewollt, aber ich habe wahrscheinlich automatischen Start gewählt, letztendlich. Also, deswegen sind wir jetzt schon live. Okay. Gib mal bitte ganz kurz eine Sekunde. Brauche ich nicht. Das ist auch unwichtig. Sortieren wir ganz kurz ein bisschen hier die Ordnung. Ordnung in die ganze Sache rein. Und perfekt, da sind wir ja schon live. Also sage ich mal euch herzlich willkommen. Wir werden heute ein bisschen n8n lernen. n8n ist ein wichtiger Punkt. Sport, warum steht da Sport? Details, Kategorie Sport sicher nicht, das ist Bildung. Mal Bildung, okay. Ich lerne echt n8n, um ein bisschen das zu erlernen und zu schauen, wie das funktioniert. Ich habe jetzt mal schon eine Session gemacht, genau, und wir werden mal gucken, wie das so funktioniert. Und jetzt muss ich ganz kurz einen kleinen Trick machen, was ChatGPT mir da gesagt hat, bitte mache das. Das ist mein alter YouTube-Kanal. Wenn ihr gerne dort abonnieren wollt, macht das auch gerne. Herzlich willkommen auf meinem Kanal. Ich habe da jetzt lange noch nichts mehr gepostet, aber da läuft auch einiges, sobald ich mal wieder Thema Motivation, aber jetzt bin ich aktuell mehr auf KI und deswegen machen wir ein bisschen mehr KI. Also, ich lerne KI. Mal gucken, kommt da was? Wie heißt das Stream eigentlich? Ich lerne. Ich lerne. Ne, n8n. Kommt da irgendwo was live? Aha, perfekt. Da sind wir. KI. Und da schreiben wir mal cool rein. Wie heißt es? Hey, ich lerne. An alle. Passt. Lernen. So, ganz cool. Und ich schreibe hey zurück. n8n. Hey, zurück. Kommt da irgendwo was live? Aha, perfekt. Da sind wir. Versuchen wir es nochmal. Und da schreiben wir mal cool rein. Hey, an, wie heißt es? Hey, alle. An alle. Passt. Lernen. So, ganz cool. Okay, schreibe, wer hey, zurück denkt, hey, zurück. Das KI, die, aha, perfekt. Da sind wir. Versuchen wir es nochmal. Und da schreiben wir mal cool rein. Ist hey, an, wie heißt es? Hey, alle. An alle. Passt. Lernen. So, ganz cool. Okay, schreibe, wer hey, zurück denkt, hey, zurück. Das KI. So. Ah, perfekt. Da sind wir. Und das lassen wir einfach im Hintergrund laufen. So habe ich ein bisschen Algorithmus Push. Und so läuft es schon mal besser. Genau, also solltest du zumindest mal gucken, ob das ist. Aber das zeigt einfach, dass es ein bisschen vorwärts geht. Und ja, dass ein realer Account ist. Bla 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 bla. Genau. So. Ein bisschen Nasenjucken gerade, merke ich. So. Perfekt. Und Workflow. Perfekt, das haben wir mal gemacht. Und anscheinend habe ich mein KI-Tutorial verloren dafür. Aber wisst ihr was? Es gibt eine ganz coole Funktion bei Verlauf. Und da gucken wir weiter.
So I can just
Ganz kurz Werbung und dann geht's richtig los, Leute. Genau.
Yeah.
2 Aufrufe.
Okay.
Herzlich willkommen.
It's not wrong.
say, like demo on May 21st, and now I have my credentials saved and named.
Ja.
Because now we can tell the difference.
Das habe ich auch schon gemacht. Hier seht ihr mal meinen Workflow, wo ich erstellt habe. Und das ist mal einfach ganz basic gewesen. Also es ist jetzt noch kein Besonderes. Sieht natürlich voll super fancy aus. Und da sagt man schon, Hätte mir ein Boomer-Chef gesagt, super, du bist Experte. Obwohl Deutsch, keine Ahnung was.
Difference between our demo credential and our n8n free OpenAI credits credential. And now hopefully we have the ability to actually choose a model from the list. So as you can see, we can access ChatGPT 4.0 latest, 3.5 turbo, 4, 4.1 mini, all this kind of stuff. I'm going to choose 4.1 mini, but as you can see, you can come back and change this whenever you want. And I'm going to
Genau, das kann man auch wechseln, genau, wie er es gesagt hast, jederzeit, wie man es gerne haben will. Ups, und wieder weiter.
keep this really simple. In the prompt, I'm just going to type in, tell me a joke. So now when this node executes, it's basically just going to be sending this message to OpenAI's model, which is GPT 4.1 mini, and it's just going to say, tell me a joke.
Okay, passt. Dann probieren wir das mal gerade aus hier. Öffnen, zack. Antwortformation. Timeout, Max-Tab. Er hat gesagt, ich muss mal zu Mini wechseln. Machen wir da mal. Und was hat er davor gemacht? Das ist noch, was ich geschickt habe, merke ich gerade. Haben wir was verpasst anscheinend? Oder es ist ein bisschen anders geworden, weil manchmal änderten sie diese ganzen Tutorials.
And then we get an output of OpenAI models that we have access to. And actually it looks like this n8n free credits only actually give us access to a chat model. And this is a bit different. Not exactly sure why, probably just because they're free credits. So what we're gonna do real quick is head over to OpenAI and get a credential so I can just show you guys how this works with input, configuration, and output. Thing. And as you can see, super visual. We saw that OpenAI, and then we get an output thing. And as you can see,
okay, machen mal einen neuen. Okay, das nehmen wir mal einfach. Das ist die Demo. Fertig, okay. So, speichern. Und ich mache jetzt auch einen neuen Workflow. Persönlich. So, was hat er da gemacht? Wir bauen es uns schnell nach. Also viel kriege ich auch hin. So. Wir wollen eine manuelle Auslösung. Ausführen. Perfekt, hat er funktioniert. Dann kann man hier ein OpenAI machen. Zack. Was hat er da gemacht? Das ist wahrscheinlich ein wichtiges Detail. Ja, wir gehen nochmal da zurück. Da könnt ihr auch damit machen. Genau. Das
environment called demo. So a couple things before we actually drag in any nodes is up here you can see where is this saved. If you have different projects, you can save workflows in those projects. If you want to tag them, you can tag different things, like if you have one for customer support or you have stuff for marketing, you can give your workflows different tags just to keep everything organized. But anyways, every single workflow has to start off with some sort of trigger. So when I click on add first step, it opens up this panel on the right that says what triggers this workflow. So we can have a manual trigger, we can have a certain event like a new message in Telegram or a new row in our CRM. We can have a schedule, meaning we can set this to run at 6 a.m. every single day. We can have a webhook call, form submission, chat message like we saw earlier. There's tons of ways to actually trigger a workflow. So for this example, let's just say I'm going to click on trigger manually, which literally just gives us this button where if we click test workflow, it goes ahead and executes. Cool, so this is a workflow and this is a node, but this is a trigger node. What happens after a trigger node is different types of nodes, whether that's like an action node or a data transformation node or an AI node, some sort of node. So what I would do is if I want to link up a node to this trigger, I would click on the plus button right here, and this pulls up a little panel on the right that says what happens next. Do you want to take action with AI? Do you want to take action within a certain app? Do you want to do data transformation? There's all these other different types of nodes. And what's cool is, let's say we wanted to take action within an app. If I clicked on this, we can see all of the different native integrations that n8n has. And once again, in order to connect to any of these tons of different tools that we have here, you always need to get some sort of password. So let's say Google Drive. Now that I've clicked into Google Drive, there's tons of different actions that we can take, and they're all very intuitive. You know, would you want to copy a file? Would you want to share a file? Do you want to create a shared drive? It's all very natural language. And let's say, for example, I want to copy a file. In order for n8n to tell Google Drive which file do we want to copy, we first of all have to provide a credential. So every app, you'll have to provide some sort of credential. Real quick demo of how this works. Node, because there's a ton of different AI actions we can take as well. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk to OpenAI's kind of like ChatGPT. So I'll click on that, and I'm just going to click on message a model. So once that
Okay. Frauenbild kann ich helfen. Schreibe mir ein Witz. Okay, das hat er gemacht. Check. Da sind wir mal da.
that pulls up, we're going to be using our n8n free OpenAI credits that we got earlier. And as you can see, we have to configure this node. What do we want to do? The resource is going to be text. It could be image, audio, assistant, whatever we want. The operation we're taking is we want to just message a model. And then, of course, because we're messaging a model, we have to choose from this list of OpenAI models that we have access to. And actually, it looks like this n8n free credits only actually give us access to a chat model. And this is a bit different. Not exactly sure why, probably just because they're free credits. So what we're going to do real quick is head over to OpenAI and get a credential so I can just show you guys how this works with input, configuration, and output. So basically, you'd go to openai.com, you'd come in here and you'd create an account if you don't already have one. If you have a ChatGPT account and you're on like maybe the $20 a month plan, that is different than creating an OpenAI API account. So you'd come in here and create an OpenAI account. As you see up here, we have the option for ChatGPT login or API platform login, which is what we're looking for here. So now that you've created an account with OpenAI's API, what you're going to do is come up to your dashboard and you're going to go to your API keys. And then all you'd have to do is click on create new key, name this one whatever you want, and then you have a new secret key. But keep in mind, in order for this key to work, you have to have put in some billing information in your OpenAI account. So throw in a few bucks, they'll go a lot longer than you may think. And then you're going to take that key that we just copied, come back into n8n, and under the credential section, we're going to click on create new credential. You may think node, because there's a ton of different AI actions we can take as well. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk to OpenAI's kind of like ChatGPT. So I'll click on that, and I'm just going to click on message a model. So once that pulls up, we're going to be using our n8n free OpenAI credits that we got earlier. And as you can see, we have to configure this node. What do we want to do? The resource is going to be text. It could be image, audio, assistant, whatever we want. The operation we're taking is we want to just message a model. And then, of course, because we're messaging a model, we have to choose from this list of OpenAI models that we have access to. And actually, it looks like this n8n free credits only actually give us access to a chat model. And this is a bit different. Not exactly sure why, probably just because they're free credits. So what we're going to do real quick is head over to OpenAI and get a credential. So make it larger or smaller if I do this. So let's just make it small. We'll move it all the way to the left and response to. One of these things you may think, and then you're going to take that key that we just copied, come back into n8n, and under the credential section, we're going to click on create new credential. All I had to do now was paste in that API key right there, and then you have the option to name this credential if you have a ton of different ones. So I can just say, like demo on May 21st, and now I have my credential saved and named. Because now we can tell the difference between our demo credential and our n8n free OpenAI credits credential. And now hopefully we have the ability to actually choose a model from the list. So as you can see, we can access ChatGPT 4.0 latest, 3.5 turbo, 4, 4.1 mini, all this kind of stuff. I'm going to choose 4.1 mini, but as you can see, you can come back and change this whenever you want. And I'm going to keep this really simple. In the prompt, I'm just going to type in, tell me a joke. So now when this node executes, it's basically just going to be sending this message to OpenAI's model, which is GPT 4.1 mini, and it's just going to say, tell me a joke. And then what we're going to get on the output panel.
Okay, das hat er gemacht gehabt. Check. Passt. Also, dann gehen wir mal auf unsere. Wir haben unser AI-Model. Guthaben. Text, genau. Witz. Benutzer. Nachricht unterhalten Sie eine Antwort. Passt. Perfekt. Nachricht hinzufügen. Nutzer und Schritt ausführen. Mal gucken, was passiert. Perfekt, das hat er gecheckt. Okay. Schreibe mir einen Witz. Mal ausführen. Mal gucken, was passiert. Schlecht liegen. Man. Also, da haben wir schon unseren ersten Witz. Also, klar, hier kommt ein Witz für dich. Warum können Geister so schlecht lügen? Weil man durch sie hindurch sieht. Okay, da seht ihr mal, was ich da kreiert habe. Okay, cool. Wir sind weiter. Und dann mache ich mal irgendwo vielleicht immer noch kleine.
Is the actual joke. So what I can do is come up right here and click on test step. This is going to run this node, and then we get an output over here. And as you can see, both with the input and the output, we have three options of how we want to view our data. We can click on schema, we can click on table, or we can click on JSON. And this is all the exact same data. It's just like a different way to actually look at it. I typically like to look at schema. I think it just looks the most simple and natural language. But what you can see here is the message that we got back from this OpenAI model was, sure, here's a joke for you. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything.
Yeah.
And what's cool about schemas is that this is all drag and drop. So now once we have this output, we could basically just use it however we want. So if I click out of here and I open up another node after this, and for now, I'm just going to grab a set node just to show you guys how we can drag and drop. What I would do is, let's say we wanted to add a new field, and I'm just going to call this OpenAI's response. So we're creating a field called OpenAI's response. And as you can see, it says drag an input field from the left to use it here. So as we know, every node we have input, configuration, output. On the input, we can basically choose which one of these things do we want to use. I just want to reference this content, which is the actual thing that OpenAI said to us. So I would drag this from here right into the value. And now we can see that we have what's called a variable. So anything that's going to be wrapped in these two curly braces and it's going to be green is a variable. And it's coming through as json.message.content, which is basically just something that represents whatever's coming from the previous node in the field called content. So we can see right here, json.message.content. We have message. Within message, we have basically a subfolder called content. And that's where we access this actual result, this real text. And you can see if I click into this variable, if I make it full screen, we have an expression, which is our JSON variable. And then we have our result, which is the actual text that we want back. So now, if I go ahead and test this step,
Jetzt habe ich mich wieder abgelenkt. HDRS und Legasthenie. Ich sag euch, das ist so eine Strafe manchmal. Du siehst was und dann denkst du,
is that this is all drag and drop. So now once we have this output, we could basically just use it however we want. So if I click out of here and I open up another node after this, and for now, I'm just going to grab a set node just to show you guys how we can drag and drop. What I would do is, let's say we wanted to add a new...
Okay, einfach ein Drag and Drop.
new field, and I'm just going to call this for latest of open.
Customer expectations are growing. Marketing and service teams, not so much. How do you retain
AI models that we have access to? You may think, and then we get a whole thing. And as you can see, supervision.
Edit Files. Okay, muss ich ganz kurz mal auf Englisch schreiben. Files. Perfekt. So, da haben wir es mal. Und was macht er?
Visual, we saw that OpenAI was thinking, and then we come over here and we get our final output, which was the actual joke. And now let me show you one more example of how we can map our different variables without using a manual trigger. So let's say we don't want a manual trigger. I'm just going to delete that. But now we have no way to run this workflow because there's no sort of trigger. So I'm just going to come back in here and grab a chat trigger just so we can talk to this workflow in n8n. I'm going to hook it up right here. I would just basically drag this plus into the node that I want. So I just drag it into OpenAI, and now these two things are connected. So if I went into the chat and I said, hello, it's going to run the whole workflow, but it's not really going to make sense because I said hello, and now it's telling me a joke about why don't scientists trust atoms. So what I want to do is I'd want to come into this OpenAI node right here, and I'm just going to change the actual prompt. So rather than asking it to tell me a joke, what I would do is I'd just delete this. And what I want to do is I want OpenAI to go ahead and process whatever I type in this chat. Same way it would work if we were in ChatGPT in our browser, and whatever we type, OpenAI responds to. So all I'd have to do that is I would grab the chat input variable right here. I would drag that into the prompt section. And now, if I open this up, it's looking at the...
Okay. Passt. Dann will das. So. Step. Rauslöschen. Warum habe ich das nicht, was er hat? Manu. Gut, vielleicht müssen wir gucken, wer es fertig gemacht hat. Jetzt weiter.
The expression called...
Ich lerne mit euch, Leute. Ich lerne mit euch. Ja. Ups, das wollte ich nicht so.
JSON.chat input, because this field right here is called chat input. Yep. And then the result is going to be whatever we type anytime, even if it's different 100 times in a row, it's always going to come back as a result that's different, but it's always going to be referenced as the same exact expression. So just to actually show you guys this, let's save this workflow. And I'm going to say, my name is Nate. I like to eat ice cream. Make up a funny story about me. Okay, so we'll send this off. And the response that we should get will be one that is actually about me, and it's going to have some sort of element of a story with ice cream. So let's take a look. So it said, sure, Nate, here's a funny story for you. And actually, because we're setting it, it's coming through a little weird. So let's actually click into here to look at it. Okay, so here is the story. Let me just make this a little bigger. Is that this is all drag and drop. Is Nate, I like connected. So if I went into the chat and I said, hello, it's going to run the whole workflow. But it's not really going to make sense because I said hello, and now it's telling me a joke about why don't scientists trust atoms. So what I want to do is...
Okay, probieren wir es mal aus. Also er hat das noch davor gemacht gehabt, dann wissen wir schon mal... So. Okay, davor muss man machen. Das müssen wir abändern. Schritt Input. Kannst du mir ein Witz So, ja, ich kann das Wetter in Serie. Okay. Das ist mal interessant. Und wir schauen mal nach. Punkt. So, und weiter geht's.
Is I'd want to come into this OpenAI node right here, and I'm just going to change the actual prompt. So rather than asking it to tell me a joke, what I would do is I'd just delete this. And what I want to do is I want OpenAI to go ahead and process whatever I type in this chat. Same way it would work if we were in ChatGPT in our browser, and whatever we type, OpenAI responds to. So all I'd have to do that is I would grab the chat input variable right here. I would drag that into the prompt section. And now if I open this up, it's looking at the expression called json.chat input, because this field right here is called chat input.
Okay.
And then the result is going to be whatever we type anytime, even if it's different 100 times in a row, it's always going to come back as a result that's different, but it's always going to be referenced as the same exact expression. So just to actually show you guys this, let's save this workflow. And I'm going to say, my name is Nate. I like to eat ice cream. Make up a funny story about me. Okay, so we'll send this off, and the response that we should get will be one that is actually about me, and it's going to have some sort of element of a story with ice cream. So let's take a look. So it said, sure, Nate, here's a funny story for you. And actually, because we're setting it, it's coming through a little weird. So let's actually click into here to look at it. Okay, so here is the story. Let me just make this a little bigger. I can go ahead and drag the configuration panel around by doing this. I can also make it larger or smaller if I do this.
Okay.
So let's just make it small. We'll move it all the way to the left, and let's read this story. So it said, sure, Nate, here's a funny story just for you. Once upon a time, there was a guy named Nate who loved ice cream more than anything else in the world. One day, Nate decided to invent the ultimate ice cream. A flavor so amazing that it would make the entire town go crazy. So let's skip ahead to the bottom. Basically what happens is, from that day on, Nate's stand became the funniest spot in town, a place where you never knew if you'd get a sweet, savory, or plain silly ice cream. And Nate, he became the legendary ice cream wizard. That sounds awesome. So that's exactly how you guys can see. What happened was, in this OpenAI node, we have a dynamic input, which was us talking to this thing in a chat trigger. We drag in that variable that represents what we type into the user prompts, and this is going to get sent to OpenAI's model of GPT 4.1 mini, because we configured this node to do so. And the reason we were able to actually successfully do that is because we put in our API key or our password for OpenAI. And then on the right, we get this output, which we can look at either in schema view, table view, or JSON view, but they all represent the same data.
Also, das ist jetzt mal sau interessant. Also, ich kann damit, wenn ich das richtig verstanden habe, ich zeige euch mal. Nein, das war nicht so. Passt. Gehen wir da. Nein, auch falsch. Genau. So, was kann ich jetzt damit machen? Also, ich kann sagen, hey, schreibe, also, hey, ich bin Elias und ich will, dass du mir n8n verkaufst, dass ich das unbedingt muss, so dass ich kein Argument habe. Das passt. So, jetzt machen wir mal so. Ich drücke mal drauf. Dann gibt es da. Blablabla. Er überlegt natürlich mit der KI. Check. So, der hat einen Workflow platziert. Und wenn ich jetzt das richtig gemacht habe. Genau, da haben wir jetzt Contact. Kontext. Deliver Message. So. Okay. So, machen wir es nochmal. Aber das Ganze nochmal. Ich glaube, da habe ich einen kleinen Fehler gemacht. Aber so lernen wir das. Also Step by Step. Also es gibt da immer, das ist der Chat, das ist das und da läuft gerade alles und das hat er irgendwie transferiert. Empty, okay, da ist noch was empty. Zack, okay. So. Hey, ich bin Elias und ich helfe dir gerne n8n zu beschreiben. Das ist eine überzeugte unbedingt haben zu wollen. Hier kommt ein starkes Verkaufsargument, die wieder mehr lässt. Okay? Warum n8n unbedingt brauchst? Automatisches alles, was du kannst, ohne zu programmieren. Es ist eine leistungsstarke Automatisierungsplattform, mit der du mühelos Workflows erstellen, die verschiedene Apps und Dienste verbinden, egal ob du E-Mails, CRM, Dateibanken oder Social Media, du kannst dir Menge Zeit und manuelle Arbeit wahrscheinlich ersparen. Aber gut, da ist mal was rausgekommen und das ist mal der Punkt. Okay, da haben wir das mal gemacht. Was meint ihr, Chat? Habe ich das geschafft oder nicht? Sind wir soweit? Ich würde sagen, ja, hast du. Warum mache ich das, dass ich mir selber schreibe? Das ist ein bisschen um den Algorithmus in YouTube zu pushen. Das ist so ein kleiner Anfängertrick. Weil am Anfang guckt uns keiner zu. Das ist ganz normal, Leute. Macht euch auch keinen Druck darüber. Aber ihr müsst zeigen im Algorithmus, hey, da sind die Leute interessiert und deswegen mache ich mir das rein. Okay? Passt. Also, was haben wir jetzt damit geschafft? Also, ich könnte theoretisch jetzt das mit einer App verbinden. Okay, sagen wir so. Ich will, dass er mir automatisiert ein Video bei Video AI zum Beispiel erstellt. Das könnte ich genau mit diesem Prompt einfach so bam, 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 bam aufbauen und dann wird es genau auf einer Plattform posten. Das ist alles möglich damit. Zack, ohne großen Aufwand. Oder schreibt mir jeden Tag einen Tweet. Kann ich auch machen. Ich kann eine Zeitauslöse machen, wo ihr dann jeden Tag einen Tweet schreibt. Und ich habe nicht mal meinen Arsch bewegt. Vielleicht macht er so und schreibt seine Tweets so und sagt, du kennst ja mich, blablabla. Schreibe Tweets wie Donald Trump.
As you can see, this is the exact story we just read. Something I wanted to talk about real quick that is going to be super helpful for the rest of this course is just understanding what is JSON. And JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And it's just a way to identify things. And the reason why it's so important to talk about is because over here, right, we all kind of know what schema is. It's just kind of like the way something's broken down. And as you can see, we have different drill downs over here and we have different things to reference. Then we all understand what a table is. It's kind of like a table view of different objects with different things within them, kind of like the subfolders. And once again, you can also drag and drop from table view as well. And then we have JSON, which also you can drag and drop. Don't worry, you can drag and drop pretty much this whole platform, which is why it's awesome. But this may look a little more codey or intimidating, but I want to talk about why it is not. So first of all, JSON is so important because everything that we do is pretty much going to be built on top of JSON. Even the workflows that you're going to download later when you'll see like, hey, you can download this template for free. When you download that, it's going to be a JSON file, which means the whole workflow in n8n is basically represented as JSON. Okay. And so hopefully that doesn't confuse you guys. But what it is it's literally just key value pairs. So what I mean by that is like over here, the key is index and index equals 0. And then we have like the role of the OpenAI assistant, and that's the key. And the value of the role is assistant. So it's very, very natural language if you really break it down. What is the content that we're looking at? The content that we're looking at is this actual content over here. But like I said, the great thing about that is that pretty much every single large language model, or like ChatGPT, Claude 3.5, they're all trained on JSON and they all understand it so well because it's universal. So right here on the left, we're looking at JSON. If I was to just copy this entire JSON, go into ChatGPT and say, hey, help me understand this JSON. And then I just basically pasted that in there. It's going to be able to tell us exactly like which keys are in here and what those values are. So it says, this JSON represents the response from an AI model like ChatGPT in a structured format. Let me break it down for you. So basically it's going to explain what each part of this JSON means. We can see the index is 0. That means it's the first response. We can see the role equals assistant.
Und Und da lernt ihr gleichzeitig Programmieren. Geil.
We can see that the content is the funny story about Nate.
Code schreiben.
We can see all this stuff, and it basically is able to not only break it down for us, but let's say we need to make JSON. We could say, hey, I have this natural language. Can you make that into JSON for me? Hey, can you help me make a JSON body where my name is Nate, I'm 23 years old, I went to the University of Iowa, I like to play pickleball. We'll send that off. And basically, it will be able to turn that into JSON for us. So here you go. We can see name, Nate, age 23, education, University of Iowa, interests, pickleball. And so don't let it overwhelm you. If you ever need help either making JSON or understanding JSON, throw it into chat and it will do a phenomenal job for you. And actually, just to show you guys that I'm not lying, let's just copy this JSON that chat gave us, go back into our workflow, and I'm just gonna add a set field just to show you guys. And instead of manual mapping, I'm just gonna set some data using JSON. So I'm gonna delete this, paste in exactly what chat gave me, hit test step, and what do we see over here? We see the name of someone named Nate, we see their age, we see their education, and we see their interest in either schema, table, or JSON view.
Ich finde das geil.
So hopefully that gives you guys some reassurance, and just once again, JSON's super important, and it's not even code. That is just a really quick foundational understanding of a trigger, different nodes, action nodes, AI nodes. You have a ton to play with, and that's kind of like the whole most overwhelming part about n8n is you know what you need to do in your brain, but you don't know maybe which is the best n8n node to actually get that job done. So that's kind of the tough part, is it's a lot of just getting the reps in, understanding what node is best for what, but I assure you by the time your 2-week trial is up, you'll have mastered pretty much all that.
Das ist ein Beispiel, wie wir zum Beispiel einen Agenten aufgebaut haben. Ja, das ist jetzt real, ja, vom Projekt von uns, aus unserem.
All right, but something else I want to show you guys is now what we're looking at is called the editor. So if you look at the top middle right here, we have an editor, and this is where we can, zoom out, we can move around, we can basically edit our workflow right here, and it moves from left to right, as you guys saw, the same way we read from left to right. And now, because we've done a few runs and we've tested out these different nodes, what we'll click into is executions. And this will basically show us the different times we've ran this workflow. And what's cool about this is it will show us the data that has moved through. So let's say you set up a workflow that every time you get an email, it's going to send.
Mal gucken. Kaffeegeräusch. Okay. So, Executions. Seht ihr, da habe ich deutlich mehr wie er, weil ja gut, Abfänger. Klick, 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 klick. Aber ja gut, passt. Da haben wir das mal gesehen. Passt. Und weiter geht's im Text. Kann ich das irgendwie vielleicht so reintun? Muss ich die ganze Zeit immer hin und her switchen und spare mir das Ganze auf einen Schlag, kann man so sagen. Ne? Perfekt. Und dann haben wir das perfekt. Und weiter geht's.
Some sort of automated response. You could come into this workflow, you could click on executions, and you could go look at what time they happened, what actually came through, what email was sent, all that kind of stuff. So if I go all the way down to this third execution, we can remember that what I did earlier was I asked this node to tell us a joke. We also had a manual trigger rather than a chat trigger, and we can see this version of the workflow. I could now click into this node and I could see this is when we had it configured to tell us a joke, and we could see the actual joke it told us, which was about scientists not trusting atoms. And obviously we can still manipulate this stuff, look at schema, look at table, and do the same thing on that left-hand side as well. So I want to talk about how you can import templates into your own n8n environment, because it's super cool. And like I said, they're all kind of built on top of JSON. So I'm going to go to n8n's website, and we're going to go to product, and we're going to scroll down here to templates, and you can see there's over 2,100 workflow automation templates. So let's scroll down. Let's say we want to do this one with cloning viral TikToks with AI avatars, and we can use this one for free. So I'll click on use for free. And what's cool is we can either copy the template to clipboard, or since we're in the cloud workspace, we could just import it right away. And so this is logged into my other, kind of my main cloud instance, but I'll still show you guys how this works. I would click on this button. It would pull up this screen where I just get to set up a few things. So there's going to be different things we'd have to connect to. So you would basically just select your different credentials if you already had them set up. If not, you could create them right here. And then you would just basically be able to hit continue. And as this loads up, you see we have the exact template right there to play with. Or let's say you're scrolling on YouTube and you see just a phenomenal Nate Herc YouTube video that you want to play around with. All you have to do is go to my free school community and you will come into YouTube resources or search for the title of the video. And let's say you wanted to play with this shorts automation that I built. What you'll see right here is a JSON file that you'll have to download. Once you download that, you'll go back into n8n, create a new workflow, and then when you import that from file, if you click on this button right here, you can see the entire workflow comes in, and then all you're gonna have to do is follow the setup guide in order to connect your own credentials to these different nodes. All right, and then the final thing I wanted to talk about is inactive versus active workflows. So you may have noticed that none of our executions actually counted up from 0. And the reason is because this is counting active workflow executions. And if we come up here to the top right, we can see that we have the ability to make a workflow active, but it has to have a trigger node that requires activation. So real quick, let's say that we come in here and we want a workflow to start when we have a schedule trigger. So I would go to schedule and I would basically say, okay, I want this to go off every single day at midnight as we have here. And what would happen is while this workflow is inactive, it's only actually going to run if we hit test workflow and then it runs. But if we were to flick this on as active, now it says your schedule trigger will now trigger executions on the schedule you have defined. These executions will not show up immediately in the editor, but you can see them in the execution list. So this is basically saying two things. It's saying now that we have the scheduled trigger set up to run at midnight, it's actually going to run at midnight because it's active. If we left this inactive, it would not actually run. And all it meant by the second part is if we were sitting in this workflow at midnight, we wouldn't see it execute and go spinning in green and red in live real time, but it would still show up as an execution. But if it's an active workflow, you just don't get to see them live visually running and spinning anymore. So that's the difference between an active workflow and an inactive workflow. Let's say you have a trigger that's like, let's say you have a HubSpot trigger where you want this basically to fire off the workflow whenever a new contact is created. Okay. So you'd connect to HubSpot and you would make this workflow active so that it actually runs if a new contact's created. If you left this inactive, even though it says it's going to trigger on new contact, it would not actually do so unless this workflow was active. So that's a super important thing to remember. All right, and then one last thing I want to talk about, which we're not going to dive into because we'll see examples later, is there is one more way that we can see data rather than schema, table, or JSON, and it's something called binary. So binary basically just means an image or maybe a big PDF or a Word doc or a PowerPoint file. It's basically something that's not explicitly text-based. So let me show you exactly what that might look like. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add another trigger into this workflow, and I'm going to click on tab. And even though it doesn't say like what triggers this workflow, we can still access different triggers. So I'm just going to type in form, and this is going to give us a form submission that basically is an n8n native form. And you can see there's an option at the bottom for triggers. So I'm going to click on this trigger. Now, basically what this pulls up is another configuration panel, but obviously we don't have an input because it's a trigger, but we are going to get an output. So anyways, let me just set up a quick example form. I'm just going to say, the title of this form is demo. The description is binary data. And now what happens if I click on test step, it's going to pull up this form. And as you can see, we haven't set up like any fields for people to actually submit stuff. So the only option is to submit. But when I hit submit, you can see that the node has been executed. And now there's actually data in here submitted at with a timestamp. And then we have different information right here. So let me just show you guys, we can add a form element. And when I'm adding a form element, we can basically have this be, date. It can be a drop down. It can be an email. It can be a file. It can be text. So real quick, I'm just going to show you an example where let's say we have a form where someone has to submit their name. We have the option to add a placeholder or make it required. And this isn't really the bulk of what I'm trying to show you guys. I just want to show you binary data. But anyways, let's say we're adding another field that's going to be a file. I'm just going to say file, and this will also be required. And now if I go ahead and hit test step, it's going to pull up a new form for us with a name parameter and a file parameter. So what I did is I put my name and I put in just a YouTube short that I had published, and you can see it's an MP4 file. So if I hit submit, we're going to get this data pulled into n8n, as you can see in the background. Just go ahead and watch. The form is going to actually capture this data. There you go, form submitted. And now what we see right here is binary data. So this is interesting, right? We still have our schema, we still have our table, we still have our JSON. But what this is showing us is basically, okay, the name that the person submitted was Nate. The file, here is some information about it as far as the name of it, the MIME type, and the size. But we don't actually access the file through table or JSON or schema view. The only way we can access a video file is through binary. And as you can see, if I clicked on view, it's my actual video file right here. And so that's all I really wanted to show you guys was when you're working with PDFs or images or videos, a lot of times they're going to come through as binary, which is a little confusing at first, but it's not too bad. And we will cover an example later in this tutorial where we look at a binary file and we process it. But as you can see now, if we were doing a next node, we would have schema, table, JSON, and binary. So we're still able to work with the binary, we're still able to reference it, but I just wanted to throw out there, when you see binary, don't get scared. It just basically means it's a different file type. It's not just text-based. Okay, so that's gonna do it for just kind of setting up the foundational knowledge and getting familiar with the dashboard and the UI a little bit. And as you move into these next tutorials, which are gonna be some step-by-steps, I'm gonna walk through every single thing with you guys, setting up different accounts with Google and something called Pinecone, and we'll talk about all this stuff step by step. But hopefully now it's going to be a lot better moving into those sections because you've seen, some of the input stuff and how you configure nodes and just like all this terminology that you may not have been familiar with, like JSON, JavaScript variables, workflows, executions, that sort of stuff. So like I said, let's move into those actual step-by-step builds, and I can assure you guys you're going to feel a lot more comfortable after you have built a workflow end to end. All right, we're going to talk about data.
So Leute, also ich denke, wir haben es jetzt mal geschnallt, was wir machen müssen. Ich werde jetzt ein paar Shorts machen natürlich, weil das muss ich jetzt auch machen, ein bisschen Werbung mag ich. Weil sonst wird das nichts mit den ganzen Sachen und wie wir das aufbauen. Aber ihr werdet es genau sehen, also ich werde einfach jetzt ein paar Shorts mal posten und genau, das war jetzt mal der erste Livestream. Die Person, die da geschrieben hat, das war ich selbst. Einfach ein bisschen zu zeigen, hey, die Leute interessieren sich ein bisschen für meine Sachen. Und wir werden uns dann sehen, genau. Und wenn ihr Interesse habt, mit mir mitzulernen, seid da gerne dabei. Ich werde es trotzdem ein bisschen noch in diesem Shorts-Format lassen. Ab 100 Abonnenten, machen wir es so, werde ich auch ein Langformat-Video aufbauen nebenbei. Aber genau, was haben wir gelernt? Also, ich weiß jetzt, wie man ungefähr die KI, also ChatGPT, mit n8n verbindet. Ich weiß, wie man zum Beispiel bei so einem Work-Process einen Witz macht, also einen Witz erzählen lässt. Und das ist mal so die Basis. Es war ja ein bisschen mal die Einführung, aber hey, ich sag so, das ist der erste Schritt und das ist der Anfang. Und genau, also ich werde das jetzt jeden Tag machen. Genau, wir werden jetzt dann auch, werde ich ein paar Videos machen drüber. Also Videos, ich werde einfach kurze Shorts machen, dann kurz erklären, ein bisschen Werbung machen. Hey, abonniere ja, wenn du das und das noch nicht gewusst hast. Hey, dann ist die Zukunft und bla 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 und bla bla bla. Und wenn dich das interessiert, komm in meinen Livestream und lerne mit mir zusammen das große Spiel. Gut, dann lassen wir euch mal. Wir sehen uns, denke ich, sagen so in den nächsten, heute Abend vielleicht morgen, mal gucken. Aber ich werde jetzt mal ein paar Videos machen und mal eine Mittagspause, weil ja, ich denke, jetzt kommt nicht mehr viel mehr. Aber wir waren jetzt, kann man so sagen, wie lange war ich jetzt online? Oh. Egal, wir werden sehen. Genau, ich war jetzt fast eine Stunde online dafür und dann machen wir das so weiter.